on this episode of Therapy Bites Art Lab.
Hey, T-Ballers, lean in and listen up to the problem we can help you solve today. How can you help another person see more clearly when they're all in the middle of catastrophizing and everything? How can you get them to listen to reasoning? You know that we teach in the art lab that no one can control your neurons, but does that mean that we have no influence? Today, we'll learn some crisis-tested, world-class techniques from one of the world's best negotiators. This battle-tested negotiator trains negotiators all over the world, and we have him here just for you. If you've seen Samuel L. Jackson in the movie The Negotiator, he's the real guy that Kevin Spacey is pretending to be.
Stay tuned following the interview for On the Couch and Off the Rocker, our special guest's psycho-silly analysis by Art Lab's own head cabbager, Dr. Ima Freudnot.
Welcome to Therapy Bites Art Lab, where Dr. Heath and his special guests share real-life stories of helping and healing, fresh from the actual therapy couch, while taking a bite out of common counseling missteps and misconceptions. And now, here's Heath and the T-Ball team.
Hey, T-Ballers, welcome to another great episode of Therapy Bites Art Lab. And our special Art Lab guest is a U.S. Marine Corps veteran with 31 years in public safety who spent the majority of his career on assignments involving crisis negotiation, suicide intervention, verbal de-escalation, peer support, and even autism awareness and mental illness. He's instructed law enforcement locally, nationally, and internationally, having specialized training in crisis counseling and psychological first aid. He currently volunteers working a crisis hotline and as a peer support team member with his awesome service dog, Dexter. Today, folks, we're going to talk about the mechanics of negotiating during crisis. What are some techniques that the real pros use, and how can world-class negotiation techniques help your relationships? Lieutenant Mark Lowther retired, and by the way, he's not retired, believe me. He's probably one of the most unretired guys that I know. But he served as a SWAT and hostage negotiator for a major portion of his career. His background and experience come from serving on 2 Metro SWAT teams. Lieutenant Lowther has experience on all levels of negotiations, from tech negotiation team leader, and he has personally been involved in many threat and suicide and SWAT negotiations, including barricaded gunmen and hostage incidents. Lieutenant Lowther also served 10 years as a crisis intervention team, that CIT officer, instructor, and training coordinator. Lieutenant Lowther was named by the Utah Tactical Officers Association as the 2012 Crisis Negotiator of the Year. Some of his experiences in SWAT negotiations are featured in a book, Crisis Cops 2. Y'all can grab you a copy. And he's also served on federal task forces as a sworn special deputy United States Marshal. Mark, buddy, it is great to have you in the art lab today. And you're hailing all the way from cold, snowy Utah. We're just talking in the pre-roll there. But share with us a little bit about what drew you to law enforcement and in general, in general, but in particular, to crisis negotiation.
Stay in the stands at the end of the interview, T-Ballers, and witness our special guest slug a bite-sized brain ball with your name all over it, clean out of the art lab.
I'd actually, when I grew up, I'd always kind of wanted to be, believe it or not, a paramedic. And when I got out of the Marine Corps, I kind of started going down the path of becoming an EMT and a paramedic, and I joined the local sheriff's office search and rescue team, and was kind of going down the first aid EMT route, and did a ride along, and I enjoyed what I saw, and they enjoyed what they saw. They offered to send me to the police academy. I went. They hired me, and the rest is kind of history. I started off in the jail, spent a couple years in the jail, went out on the road. Early in my career, I didn't have any involvement with the incident, but I ended up on the perimeter of a SWAT barricade situation. Got to watch the SWAT team operate, got to watch the negotiators operate, and I knew early in my career that that's what I wanted to be, and just gradually worked my way that direction, and the rest is kind of history.
Wow. Have you've been around a long time? Have you seen it change quite a bit? Negotiation strategy, technique, how it's looked at?
I've seen the technology change a lot. The principles, the techniques are still the same. In fact, probably one of the major changes for the better is it's become more and more accepted. Back in the old days, it was just kind of the brute force thing of come out or we'll get gassed in and that kind of thing. And the way of the words become a lot more accepted. The FBI gathers statistics. In fact, I judged a negotiation competition last week in Texas and also presented there. And I also had an opportunity to sit in on a presentation done by an FBI special agent. And the statistic now is about a 95% success rate in hostage situations of it being resolved through negotiations nationally.
Wow.
Wow.
That is excellent. And kind of along those lines, Mark, what do you think you bring to the table different that maybe other negotiators might do differently?
Well, I'm going to be 57 this year, probably maturity, life experience. My wife would probably dispute the maturity part. Go through calmness. You've been on the job for a while. You've seen a lot, not a lot. Gets me excited and those types of things. Kind of the been there, done that thing, and patience, probably a lot. See a lot of younger negotiators get a little worked up and stuff like that. And it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. When you're dealing with emotions, when you're and this is more your guys' wheelhouse, especially Heath. But when you're dealing with the brain, when you're dealing with that fight or flight mechanism. It takes a while for that amygdala to settle down and for that rational problem solving part of the brain to kick in. And so, understanding that, it's taken years of experience and years of training to realize that, when you first make contact, especially in one of these highly emotionally driven situations, that you've got to let those emotions kind of settle down a little bit before you can start dealing with that rational problem solving part of the brain. And understanding that has helped a lot. Initially it used to really frustrate me.
Yeah, I've seen that in relationship therapy, marriage therapy, and people get in these arguments, and for some reason they expect. I don't know, if you're having an argument, you're going to have difficult emotions. I think that's just part of it. But I think the mistake gets to be that we want things to happen too quick, and we want things to move along too quick. And I've heard, folks say in hostage negotiation scenes, either they're going to come out or we're going to go in and get them and kind of John Wayne it. And I think that getting in a hurry when you're negotiating is probably one of the worst things you can do. As you say, it's a marathon, not a sprint. What are some other common hurdles or road bumps that you see people hit during negotiations that kind of flub things up?
Problem solving, and it kind of goes back into that, people want to talk, people want to tell their story. And one of the main things I teach cops is getting out of that patrol officer mode, because, as a cop, we go, call to call to call, and we're solving people's problems. Their 14-year-old kid won't get out of bed and go to school. They can't get along with their neighbor. They can't get along with each other. And we show up and we solve people's problems. And then we end up on this crisis call, whether it's a barricaded individual, a suicidal person, or a hostage taker. And, one of the things I try to teach negotiators is we have to make that brain switch ourselves. We have to recognize that, okay, this isn't the typical patrol call. I'm not going to be done with this call in 15 or 20 minutes. I'm going to be here a while. And so we have to switch into that negotiator mode and not try to rush into solving the problem, because what I found is most people aren't going to sit back and allow you to suggest, recommend solutions to their problem until they feel like you understand their problem. So you need to listen to their story. And as cops, we think we're great listeners because we write hundreds of police reports every month, but we really don't listen to people. We interview people or even interrogate people. And so, someone will start telling us what happened. And, we have boxes we have to check. We have blanks we have to fill. So, they'll say, yeah, this car pulled up and these two guys got out. And then we'll jump in and interrupt them. What time was this? What kind of a car was it? What color was the car? What did the guys look like? What were they wearing? What race were they? What color hair did they have on? And I said, okay, please continue. Well, then they walked across the street and went to that house, and then we'll jump in and we'll interrupt them again. So we think we're listeners, but we're really not. And so we have to get out of that patrol officer mindset and just sit back. And we can ask a few questions, but just really let this person kind of tell their story from beginning to end with minimal interruptions so they feel heard and understood. And then, of course, use the good old active listening skills, especially paraphrasing and summarizing to make sure that they feel understood, because until someone feels like that you've heard and understood their story, their problem, their crisis, they're not going to be too open to suggestions, recommendations that you start presenting them as to why they should release a hostage, step off the top of the roof to put the gun down.
Mark, what you just said could be a snippet that was played in every graduate school training counselors, mental health clinicians, because I think that's what it's really amazing we're talking about this. I didn't really plan on getting into this, but as you're saying that, I'm thinking, man, that sadly, this really is sad. Sadly, that is the opposite of how counselors get trained. Counselors get trained not to have a conversation with clients and patients, but how to interrogate them. But we call it the assessment interview.
Yes.
But it's really not the assessment interview. It's the assessment interrogation.
I was thinking that same thing. Back when I worked at an agency, there was like this 10-part, and each part had like 20 parts within it, intake assessment that we had to complete within an hour, which really wasn't possible. So it usually went longer. And I would specifically tell people, this is not what therapy is like. I am so sorry you have to do this right now, but this is not what the therapeutic process is going to be like. I promise I'm going to listen to you. We're going to actually talk about what's going on. But today we just have to get through the paperwork.
And old psych professor, Dr. Drob, I was actually quite alarmed to hear him say this. He said on the first session or interview, we asked him, how do you do it and what do you do? We thought we'd get this long, complicated piece of rhetoric. And he said, usually I just let them talk. We thought,
what a concept.
What? You can't do that. You've got to pull out your list of questions.
It's not unusual, depending on the situation. It's not unusual for in the first 20 minutes of me making contact with someone for me to say less than 5 words, and some of those are even just minimal encouragers, for you to start offering solutions, recommendations, and ideas as to why this person should do, what you're suggesting they should do. They need to feel that you understand. And you may know full well, after interviewing witnesses and family members and coworkers, you may have a really, really good idea as to why they're on that rooftop, why they're on that bridge, why they've got a gun to their head, why they're holding hostages. But that's only half the battle. The other half of the battle is convincing them that you understand. And to do that, you got to listen to them and you got to use active listening. And so I know he's probably familiar with it. I don't know if anybody out there's ever heard of what we call the 80-20 rule. But in negotiations, the 80-20 rule is we should be listening 80% of the time and only talking 20% of the time.
And lots of husbands out there are going to pick on the husbands listening. Are going to say that is, my dad had a term also, is bass-ackwards. Why would I want to waste my time listening to my spouse 80% of the time when I already know what they're going to say? And of course, in the art lab, we call that mind reading and fortune telling. You can't read somebody's mind. You don't know what's going to happen in the future. But to go back to another quick comment Mark made about minimal encouragers, just to kind of define define that since some folks may not know what that is. That is, it's complicated. You get you a pen so that you can write this down. I'm going to give you some minimal encouragers. You ready? Okay, here we go. Yeah. Uh-huh. Okay. See, it's just that simple, but we complicate it because we're so destination driven instead of process driven. And a funny story about that is funny now. It wasn't funny at the time. I had a person I was working with, and I love this guy. I really did. He passed away. I miss him. He was a great guy to work with. But I told him about minimal encouragers, and he said, "Hey, you know what? I tried that with my wife, and that did not work." "Oh my goodness, I'm sorry to hear that." I said, "How did you do it?" And he said, and this is a family show, but I'll say this for effect. She started bitching, griping, complaining, and I tried to use that, and I said, "Yeah, okay, yeah, okay, yeah, okay,
boy.
yeah, okay." And he said, "That just made matters worse." And I said, "That's because you're being a freaking moron. That's not how you do that. You got to do it with intention and with care and courtesy, and you're just being a butthole." And I say that therapeutically, but that's minimal encouragement.
Oh my goodness.
But I think we have to get beyond being destination oriented and see the conversation as a journey, and then to take time and sightsee along the way. Hey, look at that. Isn't that interesting? Oh, and look at that. Is that interesting? And one more thing you said I think is just fabulous, Mark. You on the scene as the negotiator may already know all this information because you've gathered this information, and yet, and it's a big and yet, you still let that person tell their story.
Absolutely.
Now, why would you want to do that? Because you already know this stuff. What a freaking waste of time, folks are thinking.
Because it's just that need they have to tell their story. And I still want to hear it from them. I want to hear their details. I want to hear their voice inflection. And I want them to, depending on the dynamic, if it's face to face or over the phone, I want them to hear my acknowledgement with it. And it can anger them a little bit. If I say, "Hey, I talked to your sister," that can anger them a little bit. Well, she don't know, or, she's got a bias or whatever. So we have that phrase, "talk to me," is like, "Hey, tell me what's going on today. Talk to me. Why are we here today? What's going on?" It's very, very therapeutic for these individuals to kind of get this off their chest. It's that, for lack of a better term, kicking the dog to just get this off their chest and to vent. It de-escalates them also in the process to, they may even be shouting and yelling it. It may not be just a casual conversation. Spit may be coming out of their mouth, and they may be red-faced, and it's kind of getting it off their chest as they say it, but it can be therapeutic in the process.
Well, sure. And I would like to give our listeners a bit of a image to pair with what Mark just said. Is if you've ever seen a pressure cooker. When I was a kid, we raised all our own food, and we would can things, and we put them in a pressure cooker to seal it tight, and that way it would last until the second coming or whatever. It's good for the next 1,000 years. But we'd stick this thing in a pressure cooker and had that little steam release valve on top that went like that. And I view that as that's what negotiators do. They're that little steam release valve assisting all that pressure getting out. And that just takes time. But it seems like a lot of people, and since I'm a guy and I'm a husband, I'll pick on men, that when we're communicating with our wives and our children, our loved ones, that we expect that not to happen. That if we were in charge of manufacturing pressure cookers, we would manufacture them without that steam release valve. And of course, unless you're a science moron, you'll see that would be a terribly bad idea because the freaking thing would explode. I think the role of a clinician is to let a person sit in front of you and same with the negotiator, same with the husband. Imagine, folks, trying that with your spouse. Just let them talk. Try that with your kid and just let them vent that steam. And there's going to be time for you to talk. We had a guest earlier in the week, and I love what he said. Alan Carroll said that the in-breath, breathing in, allows space for communication to occur. If you're not breathing in, you're not allowing that space for communication, true communication to occur. Therefore, focus more on taking breaths than you do spitting out words. I think that's a large message from the Creator that you cannot talk while you're breathing in. Give it a shot. When you're breathing in, you are forbidden to talk. And I think that's a great point that our Creator has made to us that we're often unaware of.
That's really good. I had a quick question for you. Mark, when you're with the knowledge that you have from doing negotiation tactics, has that helped you with like everyday today problems or help you overcome anything personally that you've had to go through?
Yeah, as long as I get into that mindset in my career, I've also experienced, as any cop has, my share of traumatic calls. And I also, I didn't come on the show to disclose this, but I was also diagnosed with PTSD, fairly chronic PTSD. And I suffered with that for a number of years until I went through EMDR therapy a few years ago. When my PTSD would get the best of me, it was funny but not funny. I could talk to a barricaded gunman or a hostage taker for 8 hours and have the patience of a saint, but yet walk into Walmart or get in the car and drive down the road and get pretty agitated pretty quickly. So it would really be kind of a mindset that I would have to remind myself to click that on as well. So it has helped me and it can help me, but I have to remember to apply those techniques myself and to flip that switch on. So it's not on autopilot all the time.
Do you find that when you're in a personal situation and you're actually deploying these techniques, that it can actually be a calming thing for you?
If I know ahead of time, like if I know in my personal life that I'm going to be dealing with a stressful situation or talking to someone like a friend or someone that's in crisis or something, I can get prepared for it. I can be prepared to do that. Doesn't work so much, she's sitting behind me, but doesn't work so much with my wife because she's kind of clued into it. So when I try using the active, she says, "Don't try that negotiator crap."
It's biblical. It's actually biblical. A prophet hath no honor in their own country.
Yeah.
It's the same thing trying to be a therapist with your spouse.
Absolutely.
Please stop.
You should never do that. I think a lot of the negotiation techniques that I use with my wife are just kind of inside my head, things that I remind myself of. And here's a technique for you guys. Mark has probably heard me say this, but we used to travel around together and had some good times training together. But I always loved standing in front of a room of police officers and recommending that they use copious amounts of LSD. And of course, I'd get a funny look, and I'd say, "Well, it's not the chemical you're thinking of. It's lower your volume." Because when we're upset, angry, we tend to talk really loud like this. Lower your volume. You're not probably talking to a deaf person. If you're talking to a deaf person, then, make sure their hearing aids are on. Or slow your tempo. You don't have to talk like there's a machine gun caught in your throat. Take deep breaths and slow your tempo. Alan Carroll, who's a world-class meditation teacher, says when he practices actually putting spaces between his words, he'll actually say a couple words and take a breath and say it sounds choppy, kind of like William Shatner playing Captain Kirk on the early Star Trek episodes. But you can put space between your words, and that way there's more in-breaths, lower, slower, deeper. And deeper is deepening your volume, because if you pay attention, you start talking way up here in the stratosphere. I've told you the last time, I'm sick and tired of saying this. And all of a sudden you're in outer space and you've lost the conversation. There's actually an article by Carol Gilligan decades ago. Carol Gilligan, a theorist and researcher, wrote an article. It was an article called "In a Little Girl's Voice."
It's a book, too.
And is it a book, too?
I haven't.
I think I just read a segment of it because we were mandated to read it when I was in grad school. And she makes the point that people often revert to a higher pitched voice, and I say this to myself. Okay, Heath, LSD, lower, slower, deeper. Lower, slower, deeper. Lower, slower, deeper. And it works for me. You guys try it out, see what you think. What's a technique that you use for yourself, Mark, that seems to work to kind of calm yourself during difficult personal negotiation?
For full show notes and transcript of today's episode, go to therapybites.podbean.com.
Individual psychological concepts are very different animals from one another. And while they are often readily observable in the wild, the TherapyBites Art Lab Zoo affords us a unique opportunity to study them in a safe and controlled environment. Welcome to the TherapyBites Art Lab Creature Feature. Oh, good heavens!
I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't be wearing this type of mustache. They might... I don't know what they're gonna think. Maybe they'll think that I look like that guy that sells the fried chicken or whatever, but... Welcome, T-Ballers, to another Creature Feature. I'm your host, Safari Sarah, and I am here in another non-disclosed location in a rainforest looking for a very specific creature. But before I get to that, I know exactly what you're thinking. You're thinking that this white bushy mustache makes me look like Colonel Grandeur, the gentleman who sells the fried chicken. Oh, it's Colonel Sanders? And that's not what you were thinking. Okay. Actually, that proves my point, though, because today we are going to talk about the mind-reading gnat, which stands for negative automatic thought. Now, you'll hear very frequently people will say, oh, I know exactly what my husband is thinking, or what my wife is thinking, what my friend is thinking, what the person at the store is thinking. How often do you hear that? Very, very often. But the thing is, nobody knows what anybody else is thinking, okay? The only way to find out what somebody else is thinking is to ask them. And then even if they say something that we don't prefer, that doesn't even necessarily mean that's exactly what they're thinking. So, the next time you find yourself thinking, I know exactly what that person is thinking, or even deeper, I know exactly what that person thinks that I'm thinking. Whew, try to say that 10 times fast. Anytime that pops into your head, just remember, no you don't. We have no idea. Even if you've been with somebody for 50 plus years, you still don't know exactly what they're thinking. So, practice some accurate, realistic thoughts with our little buddy Artie. And keep a lookout for this guy, this mind-reading gnat. He doesn't know as much as he thinks he knows, okay? But I hope you enjoy the rest of the episode, and I'll catch you in the next one, T-Ballers.
Thank you for joining us for the TherapyBites Art Lab Creature Feature.
You're listening to Therapy Bites Art Lab, bite-sized therapy for your brain with Dr. Heath and the T-Ball team. The best advice on the net. No copay required.
You're slipping beneath the cushions of your bobble-headed psychotherapist's couch, leaving behind empty, echoing, cushy, comforting, pseudo-psychological claptrap. Moving into a deeper dimension of your own mind, where distorted thinking, hurting, hopelessness, and regret evaporate into clarity, healing, renewed hope, and newfound resilience. That's the podcast sign up ahead. Your next stop, TherapyBites Psych Secrets.
Labels everywhere, and not a clinical thought to think. Doc Heath here for another segment of Psych Secrets. For some reason, we humans think we understand more the more we label other humans, and clinicians are the worst. There's even an avalanche of family members labeling each other with psychiatric disorders, neighbors labeling each other with DSM diagnoses, and people at gas pumps labeling each other, and all without a single mental health license among them. What's the best way to think of people? How about thinking of them as people? And that's even if you're in the business of mental health diagnosing. Diagnosis of mental health is an archaic, overused, much abused knee-jerk practice, best left to helping folks pay for their treatment, but not the best use when actually treating the person. People always sink to the level of their labels. Best ignore the label, treat the person as a person, work together to improve the thought processes which manufacture these difficult symptoms, and leave the plastic labels to food production companies. Doc Heath out.
Once again, Doc Heath rips the cushions from the couch, dishes the dirt, lets the cat out of the bag, uncorks the bottle, letting the genie escape, and blows the lid off of another of the universe's psych secrets.
Show your T-Ball team spirit and buy your hardworking Art Lab team a cup of coffee, which helps fuel purchases of high-octane equipment and T-Ball tech that get poured back into percolating, highly caffeinated content for you. Just go to buymeacoffee.com and search Therapy Bites.
Here's Heath and the T-Ball team.
I use visualization. You mentioned Dexter when you were talking earlier, and I'll visualize my dog. But, if I could backtrack into your lower, slower, deeper, one other thing with that, I teach that as well, but it also makes you sound more sincere. One of the things that I'll cover with officers is, you can have the perfect message, but if you don't sound sincere when you say it, I would rather have a choppy, mixed up message that you sound sincere when you say it versus the perfect message, but you don't sound sincere. For example, I'll give you a really quick example. I'll say basically the same message twice here. You know what, Ken, you got some really good options here. People understand it when you walked into this bar and you saw, which is, you had a significant reaction to it. But I think people understand. And if you start making the right decisions now, you still have a future with your family versus Ken. You've got some really good options here. When you walked into this bar and saw what you saw, you had a pretty significant reaction. But I think people will understand that. And if you start making the right decisions now, you still have a future with your family. Virtually exactly the same statement, but I think the second one sounded a lot more believable versus the first one almost sounded like I was just going through the motions reading a Miranda card. So, it's calming to you, but it also sounds like you believe what you're saying versus you're just going through the motions of saying the words. And so I think there's an additional benefit to the lower, slower, deeper as well.
And I love that. That is a genius example. And to add a little bit of neuroscience to that, folks listening, that the more tense the situation, the faster the action is moving in a conversation where you're having a difficult conversation with a spouse or a kid or a neighbor, loved one, whatever, the faster the action is going, really the slower people listen and the more stuff they miss. And that's for good reason. That's for good reason, because if a person perceives that is what's in front of them is a bit of a threat, then their brain is just going to laser focus in on, is this a threat? Is this a threat? Is this a threat? Is this a threat? And pick out everything that could possibly be a threat. Well, what that means is they're going to miss more stuff. So if you use Mark's second example there, which also has the added benefit of oxygenating your own brain, your brain will always work better the more oxygenated it is. Hypoxia or lack of oxygen in your brain during a difficult conversation is a really bad idea. If you do what Mark said in that second example during different conversations and just slow your roll and be more journey oriented instead of got to get there, are we there yet, are we there yet, are we there yet, I think I see a lot of people in a conversation, they just have this are we there yet mentality, and that just kind of mucks things up.
Statistically, 70% of hostage situations in the United States aren't bank robberies or liquor store robberies. They're actually emotionally driven. It's the husband holding the wife, boyfriend, girlfriend, the guy that's been fired from his job that goes back and takes his boss hostage, or someone with some sort of a mental illness or is emotionally disturbed. They're not, only about 18 to 20% are the robbery that's gone wrong type situation. So we really have to really work through that problem solving and letting them, talk and tell their story. So it really is important to slow things down. And, it's not going to be that 20-minute call. We're going to be there generally a minimum, and it doesn't matter, but a minimum of 2 hours, and 6, 8 hours isn't unusual. Streets are going to be closed. Schools are going to be locked down. It's just the way it is. I just always tell them, this slow things down and just kind of work through it methodically. When we try rushing these things, that's when they don't feel heard or understood. And that's when we start agitating them. We have to kind of work through it as a process.
And I think that's fabulous, because I just think it's such a skill, such a wonderful talent and opportunity to just stop the clock from ticking, so to speak, and focus all your energy on this one human life. And I would ask folks listening, if you were in a crisis or you had something that was really deeply meaningful to you, it was just in the moment, for whatever reason, you think it's the biggest deal in the world. Now, any other day, you may agree it's not the biggest deal in the world. But today, in this moment, it's the biggest thing in the world. Now, you might say that's distorted thinking, and I might agree. You might say all kinds of things, but you want to slow things down and realize that what would you want in that moment? When this was the biggest thing in the world to you, what would you want others to do? And I think what you'd want them to do is stop the clock and just focus in on you. You won't need that every day, every week. You may never need that ever again. But today, it's awful cool as somebody like Mark or a clinician, or not even a professional, just a regular old person would give you the courtesy of focusing in on you as an important, valuable human being.
I wanted to ask, could you share some real life stories with us where negotiation skills have helped others?
Oh, in negotiation situations, just all the time, just slowing things down, making people, heard and understood, just opening up that dialogue. A lot of people just don't feel heard and understood, and just our opening line. One of the things I teach negotiators is when that phone first rings, one of the first things that I say when I'm able to speak to someone is, hey, my name's Mark, and I'm with the Weber County Sheriff's Office, and I'd like to talk to you. And I break that down. I say, it's not I'm Lieutenant Mark Lowther, it's I'm Mark. I'm not shoving my rank or my position in their face. I'm not hiding the fact that I'm a police officer, but I'm making myself a human being. I'm Mark. I'm not Lieutenant Lowther. I'm not Deputy Lowther. I'm not Officer Lowther. I'm Mark. And so I'm basically giving them permission to call me Mark. And then I'm with the Weber County Sheriff's Office. So once again, I'm not hiding the fact that I'm the police, but I'm not shoving my badge in their face. And then the next line, that I'm here to talk to them, or I would like to talk to them. I used to say that I'm here to help them. And what I found is about a third of the time I would get a lot of pushback, because this is early in the crisis. And they would typically blow up and say, I would say, I'm here to help you. And I would get, help me. How are you going to help me? You're going to get my wife back? Are you going to get my job back? How are you going to help me? And there would be a way to deal with that. I'd say, well, tell me about that. Tell me what's going on with your wife. Tell me what's going on with your kids. But I found that some people would think, at least initially, that early in the conversation, they would feel it's a little presumptuous to think that this person that's just rang the phone is going to help them with all of their problems, because, some of these people feel quite literally that the world is crashing down around them. And, who am I to think that I'm going to help them? So I like to just phrase that, I'm here to talk to you. And that's just kind of how we open up, just that low key introduction. And then I always teach negotiators to be, kind of put that Joe Friday, I'm dating myself here, but kind of put that dragnet Joe Friday, just the facts man voice attitude on hold, and show some courtesy and respect, because you may be the first person in a long time, or the first person ever, to show this person any kind of courtesy or respect. And that by itself can be a big icebreaker. Be a human being. One of the advantages you have in a lot of these cases is you're on the phone. You don't have that uniform in their face. and to be a human being, to be, I'm Mark. Yeah, I'm a cop, but I'm also a person. And man, just tell me what's going on today. Tell me what's happening, and put the whole, there's a time for that position of authority, Joe Friday voice, just the facts man thing. Put that on hold and be Mark the person, and man, Heath, tell me what's going on today. Tell me why I'm here. Tell me what's happening, and don't take offense if Heath fires up and drops a couple F-bombs on you and yells and swears and rants about how the world has screwed him over and the world's out to get him. Don't take that personally, but also don't go tone deaf when he does that. When he vents, when he yells and hollers and swears and cusses, listen to what he says when he does that. Because a lot of times there's a lot of truth in there. When you're in that highly emotional state, telling lies is a pretty cognitive, takes a lot of brain activity to formulate a lie. So when people are very emotional and they yell, swear, and cuss and vent, a lot of that is very, very truthful information. And so pay attention to what they say when they say that, because a lot of times those are some of the most truthful statements you'll hear out of them. Because later on, when they do start thinking more rationally, that's usually a lot of times when they'll start lying, because they don't want to get in trouble. They don't want to get arrested. They want to try to escape and get out of there. So that's oftentimes when the lies start. Usually when they're very emotional and they're yelling and hollering and swearing is usually when you get the most truthful statements out of them. So pay attention to what they say there, but don't take it personally. And then just work through the process. Like I said, it's a process to work through. And it takes a while to do that, but be patient, be a human being, and be non-judgmental, and people, smart people, dumb people, in between people, they will pick up on. I tell negotiators the two things that will kill a negotiation, figuratively, the two things that will make you lose a negotiation fast, or getting caught in a lie, or being judgmental. And they will pick up in your voice if you're being judgmental. You don't have to agree with them. We were involved with a negotiation with a former police officer that had killed his wife and his stepdaughter. We didn't like what he had done, obviously, but we didn't judge him. And as soon as, you can have a conversation with someone, you don't have to, and you can have a conversation without agreeing with their beliefs or agreeing with what they've done. But if they feel that you're starting to judge them for what they've done, that's going to pretty much slam the door on any effective negotiations. And so, and you can say that you're not doing it, but they will pick it up in your voice inflection. And we do a lot of role plays, and I'll play some audio recordings. And the negotiator say, well, no, I never said that. I says, you said it with your voice inflection. I says, you didn't come right out and say that you judged him, but your voice inflection said it. So you've got to be very, very careful with your voice inflection, because they'll pick up on those things and they'll shut right down on you, because if they feel that you're judging them, that will close the door very, very quickly.
And what drives that is our thought process about them as a human being. I don't know. It's a little bit of a space of grace if you're talking to somebody on the telephone. A lot of therapists, the whole just telephone session kind of gets downplayed. But I think that's the beauty often of a telephone session, because they can just key into my voice and they're not looking at me as, hey, here's Grand Poobah, Doctor, whoever. They're just hearing a human voice. And I think we need to think of ourselves this way. Instead of you clinicians listening, instead of thinking of yourself as the Grand Poobah expert, why not think of yourself as one human being working to help another human being? And that thought-driven process will affect what Mark is sharing with you there. Mark, what do you think, kind of getting to wrapping up today, what do you think are some techniques that our listeners can apply in their own ordinary day-to-day relationship negotiations?
I think letting people tell their story, and that's one of the ones I have a challenge with. I mean, in negotiations, I don't, but I'm always quick to want to make my point, or, if someone's saying something and I've got a counterpoint, or I know that something they've said, I've got something that contradicts it, or that they don't have quite all the information, and I'm quick to want to point that out, and I have to remember to let them finish, because even if you're correct, it's no one likes to be interrupted. I know I don't, and so I would say, be patient and let, it's fine to have questions and it's fine to have your point, but let people talk, let them have their point, let them tell their story. We don't have to, I could spend 2 hours talking about active listening, but we talked about the minimal encouragers. Paraphrasing is great. Paraphrasing is basically condensing down in a short version what this person said. So let me make sure I understand you right. What you're telling me is, and in a very short version, repeating their words back to them. It makes them feel heard and understood, and make sure that you are understanding their story correctly. Because, if there's multiple details and stuff like that, you don't want to be getting the story wrong or the account wrong. So I like to do some paraphrasing to, number one, make sure that I'm tracking them correctly, that I'm understanding them correctly. Plus, when I paraphrase, it makes them feel like, yeah, he really is paying attention to what I'm saying, and not just looking at me and nodding, and he's, daydreaming. He's mind's a million miles away. And just patience and understanding, and just, empathy, putting yourself in their shoes. If you were this person in this situation, I always, I do that a lot in suicide intervention, but just in these different situations, if, we had a guy that was barricaded once, and in 60 days' time, this guy had lost his wife, lost his job, and his house had gone into foreclosure. Now, granted, 2 of these 3 things were his own fault, poor decisions that he had made. But if I was in this guy's shoes, and in 60 days' time, I had gone through those 3 life-changing things, man, I might find myself holed up in a house, probably making some pretty poor choices too. And so, like, Heath was saying, a lot of people don't wake up in the morning planning on doing what they've done that day. I use the term John Q. If any of you have seen the movie John Q. with Denzel Washington.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Great movie.
Decent, law-abiding family man, no fault of his own, loses his job, car gets repossessed, son suffers a catastrophic medical condition, and he ends up taking, people hostage in a hospital. Not a bad guy, but man, this guy just can't catch a break and ends up going to extreme measures to try to save his son's life. And so, not everyone's methodology is quite that noble, but I kind of use him as an example. A lot of times, I've dealt with a fair number of John Q's in my life where, someone just kind of, we have a real technical term for it. We call it the whammy effect. A lot of people can handle that one whammy, the divorce, but then there's that double whammy. Then the divorce comes, and then they lose their job. So now, man, they got the double whammy, and so now they're struggling. And then that triple whammy comes. Maybe they get a cancer diagnosis, or maybe their mom passes away, or maybe their car gets repossessed, or something else happens. And so even the best of us, man, you get 2 or 3 of those in a row. And, I dare even the best of us, the most stable of us, to function well when you get 3 of those hard curveballs thrown at you back to back. And so that's what a lot of these folks are dealing with. Don't get me wrong. There's bad guys out there doing bad stuff, but a lot of the people that I've dealt with as a negotiator are fairly decent people. I mean, they may have had a few bumps with the law in the background, but they're certainly not bad folks. But they get out there and life happens, and they just can't catch a break. And so, it's just kind of important to remember that, and to kind of work through that process. And like I said, empathy, I put myself in their shoes a few times and says, man, you know what? For lack of a different set of circumstances, that could be me in there right now,
Yeah, there before the grace of God go I. And I think one of the greatest things we can do as humans is give grace and space to other humans. if not for, the grace of God, that may be me. And I wanted to really mention again, related to something that Mark said earlier about tone, volume, and cadence. Not taking tone, volume, and cadence personally. We should all practice that, use the LSD technique and all that. I teach that and have for years to patients and clients in coaching projects. But when we're on the receiving end of that, really tone is not personal. Volume, not personal. Cadence, not personal. If you're talking to somebody, and as Mark mentioned, the little almond, the little nut in our head that we all have, two of them, by the way, one on this side, one on that side. When that's lit up, that's the grizzly bear alarm system. What would you expect? You would expect people to talk louder and to talk faster and to maybe throw some terms around that you're not comfortable with, but kind of get through the weeds of all that, like Mark recommended, and listen to the message. Zero in on the message. And you can't do that if you're trying to dictate how someone is speaking and sharing that information with you. Okay, well, gosh, we've been over so many things, and for some reason, now nobody knows this, but Heather is sitting across from me looking like there's a zombie or a grizzly bear behind me, and I have no idea what that is. Is it a spider?
It's a spider.
It's a spider.
Big one.
He's fine. I rented him the other day just for this episode. I think he'll be okay. I can't see him.
He went down.
He must not be that big. He'll be fine. It's okay. See, Heather's fight or flight mechanism is lit up. In a minute, her tone, volume, and cadence is going to elevate. All right. We've talked about how we can apply this to crisis situations, but also how we can apply this information with our relationship with our spouses and our kids. I should have had her on camera at that point. She's just the picture of somebody in is it what state is it? A free state. You're in a free state because Heather looked like this. You ready? Here we go. And I'm sitting here trying to maintain my composure, talking to Mark on camera, and Heather's sitting here. I thought she was having a seizure or something. And I looked at Debbie, and Debbie's got the same look on her face. I'm like, well, I don't even know what you would call that psychologically, as a paired seizure or something. But it'll be okay. It's no worries. It would take a lot more than that. Maybe the building catching on fire or something. But just to kind of recap, we talked about some really cool things today. The mechanics negotiated during a crisis, the techniques the pros use, and you guys can deploy those in your own relationships. And all this is coming, once again, guys, I think, and Mark didn't pay me to say this, but I think one of the best, if not the best, crisis negotiators on the planet. So don't waste this. Go back, listen to the episode, write stuff down. And Mark, let me tell people how to learn more about you. Where would they go? Where's the best website to go to learn more about Mark?
If you want to schedule training with me, I do some training with dispatchers, but if you're in law enforcement, you want to do some training with me, you can go to www.llrmi.com or www.ihni.org. Those are two websites that you can find me and find classes that I'm teaching. One is Legal Liability Risk Management Institute. The other one's International Hostage Negotiation Institute.
And you can also, I think, connect with Mark on LinkedIn. Mark, you put out some fabulous videos on LinkedIn that I like to watch. Lots of pictures of you and Max, and those are really cool, too.
Dexter, yeah.
Dexter, Max. I'm thinking Mad Max. I don't know. I got Dexter, the serial killer guy from HBO, but this is your dog, Dexter.
I've been to Ukraine 5 times, and I post some stuff from Ukraine there sometimes, too. So.
Do you take Dexter with you?
No, they would like me to take Dexter, but I'm too worried about, it's a long flight, plus I'm too worried about quarantine and all that other stuff because they think the Russians are a problem if they tried quarantining Dexter away from me over there. So
you could get him a plane seat, set him right beside you. I've heard that airlines sometimes do that. You can put him right beside you. But those are fabulous pictures. Connect with Mark. I think you're out there on YouTube videos and everything, and we'll be sharing this out to YouTube and chopping it up and putting in the little blurbs and send Mark some of those. He can share it too. But one last question here.
We journey now with Doc Heath as he submerges with our special guest into the depths beneath the dark recesses of the therapy couch.
A surprise question. Right, here we go. Okay, Mark, you're in bed. You're having a nightmare. What person from history would you pick as being a nightmare to negotiate with?
probably Hitler.
Really, Hitler? Gosh, what could you do, I wonder?
I don't think there'd be much negotiating with him.
Okay. All right. You know, we had a guest that was a yoga expert, and I don't want to give this. Actually, I'm going to ask a follow-up question, but I tell you what, I'll tell you what he said. I asked him, which yoga pose would you recommend would be the most benefit to Putin? And I'm going to tell you after I ask you this question. Imagine that, and I've never done this before, but with Mark, I've got to do a bonus round. You're one-on-one in a locked room with Putin. How would you negotiate?
Putin, I actually know a fair amount about Putin and the situation he's in. Putin's problem is he knows that if he doesn't win in Ukraine, that he's going to be overthrown from power. And I think he just needs to accept the fact that he's bitten off more than he can chew. He felt that the Ukrainians would just roll over and let him win like they did with Crimea, and that's not going to happen this time. I think he just needs to learn to withdraw and accept acceptable losses, and I don't think that he'll do that. But he's going to be a difficult one.
I'm really amazed that some of our world leaders really don't have more foresight than what they do. And I just think, why can't somebody in his circle, but maybe they're all yes men and cronies or whatever, help him shift his perspective to the future as in after his death? And how do you really want this planet to remember you? I would rather someone not remember me at all than to remember me the way that we will all surely remember Putin. And I think it's such a grave tragedy.
Yeah, he can't win over there. The best outcome that he can hope for is to withdraw and keep Crimea. And that's not even what the Ukrainians want, obviously, but that's the best that he could hope for right now. Because, the Ukrainians, I know them well. I've been over there 5 times, and they're great people. They're proud people. And failure is not an option for them. They're not going to let him do what he did before when he invaded Crimea and took it without a fight. So he's in it for the long haul. He will never occupy the country of Ukraine. I can guarantee you that.
For you listeners, if you've stuck around to the end of the podcast, I'll just have to say personally, I am. If there's one good thing that comes out of this war, and I know that sounds crazy to say, is and there can always something good come out of the worst situations. It really encouraged me to learn more about the Ukrainian people, as I think we should, all people. But they really are spectacularly impressive people. We had Roman Prokopich, I think you pronounce his last name, on an interview a few days ago. And Roman migrated here with 6 family members. And this guy he and his wife have had 6 miscarriages, tragedy all around. But he goes out his way to help children. And so far, he has hosted and been parent to over 30 kids. It's amazing that people can give so much of themselves. So I have great admiration and respect for the Ukrainian people. And if you want to learn more about their culture, guys, it's as close as the internet. Just look at some of the stories, not just now, but from I guess it was World War II. When I think once again the Russians were going around murdering lots of Ukrainian people, and a lot of Ukrainian people migrated to the U.S., and there's monuments and things of that particular.
They starved them back, I believe it was in the 30s. There was a great famine. The Ukrainians are very, very resilient people. They're amazing people, and that their hearts are not in war, but their hearts are in defending their country, and the Russian soldiers' hearts are not in this war. So I guarantee you, I mean, it's going to be a long, hard, ugly war, but I guarantee you the Ukrainians will never, ever, ever give up. So
is there any end in sight?
I don't know, because like I said, Putin's very fearful that if he's not successful over there, that he'll be overthrown. I don't know that that's true, but I know that that's one of his fears. But I can guarantee you his best outcome right now is to cut his losses, withdraw, and continue to occupy Crimea. Because I can tell you what Ukraine hopes for is to not only kick his butt, but to continue marching south and retake Crimea and recapture it as well. That's what the Ukrainians would like to do. So, like I said, right now, for his best option would be to withdraw and keep Crimea and call it good at that. But I don't know that he's smart enough to do that.
Wow, that. You know, I tell my son all the time, just because you've got a DR dot before your name, PhD, DO, MD after your name, or you're the head of an entire country, doesn't mean you're a very intelligent person. That's something altogether different. Guys, T-Balders, thank you for joining us today. Share out the episode. Go back and take some notes. Biggie size and big and super size your relationships. Catch you next time on Therapy Bites Art Lab.
Bye, guys.
Bye, guys. Oh, you didn't tell him what the yoga pose was.
Oh, the yoga pose. Oh, I was almost out. Yeah, our special guest and world-class yoga pose, he actually owned a lot of yoga studios and made buku millions selling and opening and selling yoga studios. I asked him, which yoga pose do you think would most benefit Putin? And he evidently this is a real thing in yoga. He didn't make it up. He laughed. He said, I guess I'd recommend the corpse pose. It caught me off guard. I thought I wasn't expecting that. I was expecting some Indian type long name of a pose or something. The corpse pose. Thank you, T-Balders. Catch us next time. Bye now.
Bye.
Welcome to On the Couch and Off Our Rocker with Dr. Ima Freudnot, where we review our special guest Therapy Bites Art Lab episode, Psychomalarkey Scale Assessment Results. That's PMS for short.
Lieutenant Mark Lowther's PMS performance places him in the 98th percentile on the PMS's CCS, Crisis Cracking Commander Scale. This indicates a superlatively supreme elevated degree of crisis navigation in Lieutenant Lowther's cortical crevices, and a formidably fantastic tendency towards maintaining composure in chaos. Overall, Lieutenant Mark Lowther's PMS psychosillymetric assessment results present a picture of an individual tenaciously, terrifically prone to diffusing tense situations, but who tames these tumultuous, tension-taut tendencies by employing a deep understanding of mental illness, crisis negotiation, and suicide intervention. This peace-promoting, crisis-curbing soul likely has a miraculously, marvelously positive prognosis of maintaining tranquility in the near future, until these absurdly, amusingly serious features of his psyche have been psychomologically analyzed and exorcised. It is my considered conclusion that Lieutenant Mark Lowther be prescribed no less than 310 milligrams IT intratonsillar dose of crisis calmavir and a 2300 milligram ETP extrathrophonal dose of de-escalating to curtail confrontation-causing, crisis-cultivating cognitions. Dr. Ima Freudnot, Chief Shrinkstigator, Therapy Bites Art Lab.
Grab some of this episode's guest merchandise, specially designed to help keep this episode's message top of mind in your life. Don't forget friends and family members who could use an Art Lab mental boost too. Just go to therapybites.myshopify.com.
Hey, T-Ballers, thanks so much for being with us today. If we brought value to your day, show us some love by leaving your positive feedback and inviting some friends to listen in. And join the T-Ball team.
Government legal gobbledygook. Therapy Bites is not intended as a diagnostic or as an alternative to professional clinical treatment. Resources and advice are for information and entertainment purposes only. Brought to you by... Someone saying things you don't like? Tape that nagging loudmouth shut. Government-approved speech tape. Gas tape. Now available at your local hardware store. Therapy Bites Art Lab is not an approved, endorsed, authorized, butt-kissing affiliate of the United States Special Offense Assessment Police. SOAP for short. Warning. Consumption of Therapy Bites Art Lab content by Kool-Aid drinking, stinking, thinking, social media, pseudo-psychological pushing, wacky woke, anti-free speech, mumbo-jumbo advocates may cause spontaneous internal skull combustion, stomach discomfort, and or laxative effects. Allergy warning. Therapy Bites is manufactured in a facility that challenges nutty distortions, processes nuggets of accurate, realistic thinking, and life-affirming beliefs. This is the audio version of the legal fine print. Why are you still listening to this when you can catch the next great episode of Therapy Bites Art Lab with a good friend or family member? Really? Are you still there? This is getting silly. Move on to the next psychologically thrilling episode of the best advice on the net. No copay required.
Me eat copay.
Yeah, with Dr. Heath and the T-Ball team. Go ahead, don't be podgorophobic. Scoot, scoot, scoot. On to the next episode.